In this quick start video, I'm going to show you a few shortcuts that you've got when you take a snapshot. You may have noticed in the previous videos that we have some round buttons here with L, S, and T. And what these are buttons that will load data from the last snapshot, the session settings, or the selected track. And they're scattered around the bounce dialog to do things that are relevant. You also have color coding within the window to allow you to know if some of your settings are the same as the session, or if there is a function that's available to you or unavailable if it's grayed out, so that you know exactly what you can and can't do while you're bouncing given the rest of the settings you already have. A really good example of how this works is the interaction between the sample rate, whether you can import after bounce, and when you can export a copy after the bounce. The first thing is, the way we're set up right now, the sample rate is green. That means that it is the same as the session sample rate. And because it is the same as the session sample rate, we can import that after bounce. That's the same as the way Pro Tools works. And because we're doing that, import after bounce is green, export copy after bounce is yellow. And what that means is that it's something that is available to me based on the other settings that interact with it, but I'm not currently doing it. And also you'll notice that the export copy dialog is grayed out. If I enable it, it turns green, and now I can change what's going on here. Now, what happens if I change my bounce sample rate to 44.1? I'm no longer at the session sample rate, so what it's saying is you're fine to do it this way, but it's not the same as the session, and both import after bounce and export copy after bounce are no longer available. A very quick way to make it the session sample rate is to click S, and it will automatically make it the session sample rate, which will then allow me to import after bounce again, which will then re-enable export copy after bounce. So it remembers the settings, but it will only allow you to do it if you can do it. Another great use of this is, let's say you want to place your mixes on an existing track in the session. And I've got a print track down here. In the import destination, I could pop this up and select existing track, and then I could come down here and select my track, but I can do this all at once. I've selected the track I want to put this mix on. I'm going to click T, which will fill from the selected track, and it will automatically change the mode to existing track and will select the track in the session. There are a lot of things you can do using the fill from buttons, including the entire setup here from the last snapshot you took, or from the way the session is set up right now. While we're here in the snapshot dialog, let me go through a few things that have some options that you may not be aware of and are things that you can't do just bouncing within Pro Tools. The first and most obvious is to actually export a copy after you've made a bounce. The next one is you could take either your bounced file or your exported file, which would have a different file format or a sample rate or bit depth or all three, and you could upload either of those to Samply. You can import into the clip list or the new track, just like with Pro Tools, but Bounce Factory is smart enough to make new tracks inactive so they don't show up in the next bounce. The other places you can import are to an existing track, which will place every single mix on a playlist on that track, or you can import tracks into an existing folder, and that way you could put all of your stems, let's say, inside of a folder that can easily be soloed and muted to check against the actual mix. Now, while I'm here in the snapshot dialog, there's some file formats you may want to bounce that actually have more parameters than you can see in the dialog right now. And rather than make it change size and try to cram them in here, we've just made separate dialog for each type of file. So for instance, if you wanted to add an MP3, this will open up the MP3 dialog. You have all the usual metadata settings that you can make, and then you can get back to them anytime by opening the settings, but once you've set them, you can close it and forget it. Another one would be is if you're bouncing an ADM for a Dolby Atmos mix. The first thing you get is a reminder that it's up to you to set up the re-renders that you want. You don't set up the re-renders in Bounce Factory. So if you go into the bounce dialog, set up as if you're going to bounce an ADM and just create all the re-renders, then those are the re-renders that will be bounced when you bounce using Bounce Factory, assuming you enable them. Say close. Here are the settings for the bounce. You can create the ADM. You can create the re-renders, you can import the re-renders into the session afterwards. So basically, everything you can set up in the bounce dialog while bouncing an ADM can be set here, the only exception being that it's up to you to set up the re-renders beforehand. But it will more than happily batch bounce an entire album's worth of ADMs. So that's about it for the more advanced workflows for creating snapshots, but I want to just show you a couple of advanced mix pass types. So let me go back to bouncing a wave. The first of these advanced mix passes is the playlist pass. Let's say that Even Better Song is full of profanity and I need to make a clean version as well. So I'm going to duplicate my main playlist and I'm going to call this VerseVox Clean. And then presumably there'll be a bunch of edits to take out all of the bad words. What I want to do is I want to add a selected track playlist pass, exactly the same as soloing and muting, but I want the track that's selected to be set to the playlist that is active when I click the button. And we will call it the Even Better Song Clean. So now it has saved that. Now the only thing I have to remember is before I hit continue, I need the session exactly how I want it for the standard mix pass, which would be the main mix. So now we've set up to print a clean main mix, but what if we want a clean acapella? That involves switching the playlist and soloing the track, which none of our basic mix pass types will actually do. So what we're going to use is something called a mini snap. We're going to say add batch, which is where we set up stems before, but now have a look at the top half of this dialog, and you can say it's a mini snap. So we'll call this clean acapella, and you may have noticed that I didn't bother selecting any tracks before we came in here because this particular type of mix pass, once you click add, you'll be walked through the process. Let's go ahead and click add. And it will say, please make sure all the tracks to be included in the mini snapshot have their solo, mute, automation mode, and playlist selection set as you want them, and the tracks must be selected. So the first thing is we're going to switch this to clean, right? And then we want to have this soloed and this soloed because the backgrounds, they weren't being profane. And then we go and we actually select the tracks. We say OK. And Bounce Factory is going to look at the tracks and it has made a snapshot of the solos and the playlists. And then it says, don't forget to set them back the way they were before proceeding with the snapshot. And the reason for that is obviously if I leave it like this, when I hit continue, every single mix pass in the snapshot is going to have that playlist set and these solos set. So just clear solos, set this back, and that's it. Now we can print a clean main mix and a clean acapella, all within the same snapshot. I don't have to keep making versions of the session and making new snapshots. I think that's about it. So now I think we've covered everything there is. And the last thing I just want to mention is you actually can have presets for the bounce dialog. And the first thing you can do is if you have presets for the Pro Tools bounce dialog, you can click Import Pro Tools Presets. It will open up the bounce dialog in Pro Tools and get all of the parameters that you've set in those presets, and that will be your starting point, which then you can add all of the advanced functionality like exporting and what type of file format you want to export in, all kinds of things that you can only do in Bounce Factory, and then just resave your preset, and you've got 5 setups for making snapshots for different types of projects. I think that's it.